I know the OPPO and the Realme are a bit dated, but they're still very relevant in the market because they're still available and they haven't had any replacements yet. They do stand up against a lot of new earphones, including these JBLs that have recently been released. So if you would like to see any of my in-depth reviews on any of these earphones, I will leave them down in the description below. So let's jump straight in with how all of these are built. All of these earphones come with cases with lids to protect them from dust, except the JBL Wave Buds. I have seen dust and lint from my pockets settle into this case quite easily because of the lack of a lid, but it's nice to see JBL do something different with its design. This and the JBL Wave Beam comes with a matte finish, which does age much better than having a glossy finish. The Realme and OPPO both have a glossy finish, and I've had them for quite some time now. Both show a lot of scratches and scuffs on the cases, and I do wish they had a matte finish. This is the way to go forward, really. All of these have USB-C charging, which make them convenient to charge, and all have a stem-like design on the earbuds except for the JBL Wave Buds. You think that the Wave Buds aren't comfortable because of their design, but in fact it's the only one I haven't felt any discomfort or pain with. All of these other earphones have caused me discomfort, which eventually does lead to pain in the left ear when consuming media for over 30 minutes. So if you have small ears, expect these three to cause some discomfort to begin with. It's not because of the ear tips, it's because of the housing design being too large for smaller ears. Speaking about ear tips, all of them are comfortable in the ear, but the JBL Wave Buds can be annoying when you're swapping them out, since the section that mounts onto the earphones isn't rigid. It's the same soft material as the ear tip, whereas JBL has made the mounting section of the tip for the Wave Beam more rigid, making it easier to swap ear tips. The Realme Buds Air 3 also has comfortable ear tips with a rigid mount, but somehow these seem to have yellowed over time. These did have more of a white or transparent look to them, like the Wave Beam ear tips before. The OPPO's ear tips are soft and don't have a rigid mount, but the mold sits quite easily onto the earphones. And the other thing that's nice about them is it has a bit of its own meshing within the ear tip, so it can catch any earwax or dirt before it goes and gets stuck in the meshing of the earphones. It's a small and simple thing, but it's effective for long-term use. All these earphones are put together well in this lineup and should all be able to carry you for more than a year, like these Realme and OPPO earphones have done for me. All these earphones come with Bluetooth version 5.2, have touch controls and have app support as well. The JBL earphones sync up with the JBL Headphones app. This app gives you a little more control over your JBL earphones, like controlling ambient sound, changing EQ presets, or controlling a manual one. You can customize your touch controls to a certain extent. You get a voice-aware feature for when you're on calls, a smart audio and video feature which either plays the best audio quality possible or provides the quickest latency possible for video consumption or gaming, and you can find your earphones as well if it's within Bluetooth range. The Realme Buds Air 3 also gets its own app you can play around with, which is called Realme Link. It lets you swap between ANC on, off, and transparency mode. You get EQ settings that are bass boost plus, balanced, and bright modes, a volume enhancer, game mode for low latency media consumption. This is the only set that gets simultaneous device connectivity. You can toggle between having in-ear detection on and off, and an auto answer function for when you get calls. The OPPO is the only set that doesn't have its own native app. Instead, it uses a third-party app that's gotten quite good over time. You can use it with the Hey LED app to control it. It lets you toggle between having the ANC on, off, or transparency mode. You get 3 EQs you can choose from, a game mode to consume media with low latency, and you can customize your touch controls. You do get dual device connectivity with this, but it doesn't work simultaneously like the Realme does. You have to touch and hold the earbud that's been programmed to do this, and it will only switch over to the secondary device if your primary device isn't playing back any audio. This does have in-ear detection, but I wish it had an option to switch it off like the Realme has. When it comes to the latency, the Realme has a company-claimed response time of 88 milliseconds when the game mode is on. And the same goes for the OPPO. It has a company-claimed 94 milliseconds. Now, JBL hasn't claimed any specific times. They just say that it'll be a bit quicker. So if you would like to see how the JBL will respond in real time, I do have their latency demos in their in-depth reviews. When it comes to the ANC, only 2 earphones in this lineup support active noise cancelling, which is Realme Buds Air 3 and the OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro. The Realme does seem to have a slightly more aggressive ANC when it's on, because it can cut out certain higher frequencies better than the OPPO can, but it's not that the OPPO is lacking. In fact, it seems like the ANC on the Realme is working a little too hard, because there are times when I can can hear slight hisses coming in because the ANC system is working overtime. The OPPO, I think, is more of a good balance of giving you absolute silence rather than giving you any hissing sounds. So I do prefer the OPPO when it comes to the active noise cancelling. And another thing I do like, which is a very nice touch, is when you swap between the active noise cancelling modes from their respective apps, or even when you touch and hold the earbuds to switch between ANC on and ANC off, the OPPO has a very subtle and smooth way of transitioning, because you'll hear the voice say ANC off or normal mode, and you'll hear ANC on. And what it does is it gradually takes you from off to on, where it's more of a fade in. Whereas the Realme does give you the voice prompts, but it slams you in off, or it slams you into the active noise cancelling on. So it's sort of a very sudden thing that happens, whereas the OPPO is more subtle. So I think the guys at OPPO have thought about this. They've put in a lot of effort into small things like this, and it's the small things that count in the long run. So now, considering that these two have ANC, you would suspect that they also have environmental noise cancelling, and you wouldn't be wrong to think that, because both of these models do in fact have environmental noise cancelling. They are using those extra microphones to govern the noise around you and sort of suppress certain noises. The JBLs, on the other hand, they don't have environmental noise cancelling. But if you're in a situation where you want to see how you would sound to your recipient through any of these earphones, there is really only one way to find out. I'm calling from the usual busy street I do a lot of these call tests from, and as you can see, there's a lot of activity. There are a lot of two-wheelers and four-wheelers going up and down. You might get the occasional water tanker that's blowing a pressure horn, and there is also some construction going on behind you. So there is this is most likely the worst case situation you can be in, where you're on a busy street and you want to converse with somebody. So now I have been on the camera microphone all this time just to give you a sense of how much environmental noise there is right now. And I'll shift over to the JBL WaveBuds microphone right about now. So now the JBL WaveBuds, as far as I know, does not have any environmental noise cancelling, because I've not seen it mentioned anywhere online. And furthermore, it has one microphone per earbud, and usually you need a secondary microphone, one that can isolate your voice and one that can sort of figure out how much noise is bleeding in, so the AI algorithm can figure out what to negate in the conversation. So this is pretty much how your voice will carry on over to your recipient with the JBL WaveBuds. So what I'll do now is I'll switch over to the JBL WaveBeam right about now. And this also only has one microphone, much like the JBL WaveBuds. So there is no active, there's no environmental noise cancelling that is isolating your voice and sending it over to your recipient. But I have noticed that in the previous test that I did in the in-depth video, these did sound fairly good enough. Now, these are close range microphones that they're using, so it shouldn't pick up too much noise that's behind me. There are some microphones that are omnidirectional, so they pick up everything and all the noise. So expect this kind of call quality to carry over to your recipient. So I'll switch over from the JBL WaveBeam microphone to the Realme Buds Air 3 microphone right about now. So this in particular does have two microphones per earbud, so as to pick out your voice and the noise, and the AI is sort of trying to ensure that only your voice carries over as much as possible. But from the previous tests that I've done with the Realme Buds Air 3, it's not really been the best sounding set of earphones, especially when it comes to handling ENC and carrying your voice over to your recipient. But this is a call demo to give you a sense of how this handles it. You need to decide whether or not this is good enough for you. So what I'll do now is I'll switch over from the Realme Buds Air 3 microphone over to the OPPO Enco Air 2 microphone right about now. So this is what you can expect the OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro to handle when it comes to its environmental noise cancelling. Usually it has handled environmental noise cancelling for phone calls pretty well in the past. So I don't see it doesn't struggle really as much as the Realme Buds Air 3 has. At least that's my take on it. And end of the day, these demos are for you to understand how your voice will carry over to your recipient. So you need to decide which one suits you better, because you can possibly be having to take a call if you're in this kind of environment, if you're out on a run, or if generally you're down on a break from office, or just in a busy area. So this is, of course, the worst situation that is possible. All of these will handle your voice being carried over to your recipient a bit better in a more controlled environment like an office or at your home. So I do hope that this demo has given you a better understanding for these earphones, and I will see you back in the studio. All of these earphones come with dynamic drivers. The JBLs both come with 8mm dynamic drivers. The Realme Buds Air 3 come with 10mm dynamic drivers, and the OPPO comes with a 12.4mm dynamic driver. All of these support SBC and AAC codecs, and all of them have a frequency response of 20 Hz all the way up to 20,000 Hz. On a volume front, all of these earphones are comfortable to listen to at about 50% volume, except for the Realme Buds Air 3, which I was listening to at around 40 or 45% with its volume enhancer on. I wouldn't recommend listening to any of these beyond 60 or 70% if you want to preserve your hearing in the long run. Sound staging on these is very similar to each other. In fact, most of your music will exist between your ears, with some tones giving you the illusion of coming from a little further out of the earphones, but this occurs very rarely. All of them have a dead center phantom channel, and they do have good left and right separation. On an imaging front, you can't expect audiophile levels of detail recovery from any of these earphones, but these are good enough to let you zone into any of your nuances in your music that you'd like to appreciate. The Realme Buds Air 3 does give the illusion of being a bit crisper when it comes to its imaging and detail recovery, but this isn't the case. It's just accentuated a little more in the higher frequencies to give you that illusion. And speaking about higher frequencies, each of these earphones are slightly different in their presentation. The JBL Wavebuds have a softer delivery, making this range quite easy on the ears, whereas the JBL Wavebeam does have more enthusiasm here, which can tend to sound a little brittle at times. Then the Realme Buds Air 3 come in with the most enthusiasm here, which can lead to fatigue over longer listening sessions. It can be sibilant with P's and S's, and I think they've enunciated this range to give the illusion of it producing more clarity. This only leads to more ear fatigue over longer listening sessions. The OPPO handles this range with a better balanced approach without being too recessed or too exaggerated. It's just right, which ensures easier longer listening sessions than the Buds Air 3 and JBL Wavebeam. Listening to the Eagles, take it easy. The Realme Buds Air 3 and JBL Wavebeam come through clearly with good energy, which would make a first-time or short interval listener enjoy this kind of tuning in this range. It's fun to hear crisp and energetic highs for about half an hour or so, until you experience ear fatigue. Whereas when you listen to the JBL Wavebuds and OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro, this range can seem muted compared to the previously mentioned two earphones. But it's not really lacking and stays enjoyable over much longer listening sessions. These do maintain good detail in this range. Mid frequencies is where all these earphones are quite different. The JBL Wavebuds have a flat, calm approach in its delivery, which can sound quite natural and enjoyable. When you shift over to the JBL Wavebeam, it tends to sound quite nasal compared to the JBL Wavebuds. It does have a recess in the lower mids, which contributes toward it sounding this way. The Realme Buds Air 3 have a more forward sounding mid-range, almost like it's boosted like its high frequencies, but it's not quite that high in boost. It does have a recess in the lower mids for certain, but it's not as recessed as the JBL Wavebeam's tuning. The OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro comes into this range as if it were the most experienced of the lot, presenting its mid-range with the calmness and smoothness that the JBL Wavebuds come close to doing, but it's not quite there. The OPPO has a little more fullness and a natural feel in this range compared to the others here. Listening to Bastial's Pompeii, the JBL Wavebeam sounds like it doesn't have as much body as this track carries, and the Realme Buds Air 3 pushes this range with a lot of energy, but with a little bit of roundedness missing. The JBL Wavebuds are a step towards sounding more natural compared to the previous two earphones, with more depth in the vocal range, and then the OPPO gets this range just right. It's not pushing the mids aggressively toward you like the Realme Buds Air 3, but it's better composed with delivering a more natural and rounded mid-range. It just about pushes past the JBL Wavebuds in being a little more enjoyable in this range. Low frequencies also have slightly different flavors between all these earphones. The JBL Wavebeam falls short in this range compared to the others for certain. It's not really cut out for lower frequencies being heavy sounding, which makes me feel these are paired much better with more acoustic music than EDM. It does handle itself quite well with that genre of music. The JBL Wavebuds have a lot more body in this range than the Wavebeam, despite having a similar driver, which goes to show it's all about how these are tuned. This range reaches a lot lower in this range than the Wavebeam, making this a lot more fun to listen to. Then when you move over to the Realme Buds Air 3, the bass has good energy and presence, but it's not as well defined as the JBL Wavebuds. The Realme seems to want to push everything out more aggressively than have a calm demeanor with its presentation. The bass can tend to not have or show character with how it's delivered to you, compared to how well the JBL Wavebeam handles this range. Moving on to the OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro, this set really does walk into this department with a level of authority none of these earphones hold. This has terrific extension and is calm and composed in its delivery without trying to be flamboyant in its presentation. It's definitely a larger sounding set of earphones compared to any of its competitors here. Listening to Sia's Unstoppable. The JBL Wave Beam can tend to sound quite lethargic with how this range is handled, since this track needs terrific extension in the lower frequencies. It handles itself much better with acoustic music, as I mentioned. The JBL Wave Buds have good extension down low, which is able to let you enjoy the rumble in the bass this track offers up. It's certainly more fun to listen to this range on the Wave Buds than the Wave Beam. The Realme Buds Air 3 pushes this range out in what seems like a flatter response than the JBL Wave Buds. It doesn't manage to get the rumble the JBL Wave Buds is able to achieve, but does seem like it pushes its mids and highs more aggressively than its bass. It's able to deliver low-slung frequencies, but seems to lack character compared to the other earphones in this showdown. Moving on to the OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro. Thanks to having a slightly recessed mid-range, it's able to make the bass come out at you in a more prominent delivery than the Realme. It's got good extension and rumble here that the Realme wasn't able to do with as much grace. It does have the fullest sounding bass here, and somehow, despite being this heavy sounding in the bass, it doesn't eat into the mids and detail. OPPO has done a terrific job tuning this set of earphones. All these earphones have EQ modes. Now the JBL does have, I think, about 5 EQ modes you can choose from within the JBL app, and you can tweak it manually. The Realme and the OPPO have 3 different EQs you can choose from within the Realme Link and the Hey Melody app. Now you can't tweak the Realme and the OPPO manually. There is no option to do that. But these 3 are the different settings that you can choose from. So the JBLs do give you a little more control when you want to manually tweak the EQ and customize exactly how you want your music to sound. Something I should mention is that I've kept the Realme Buds Air 3 with the volume enhancer on the balanced mode, whereas the OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro has been on the bass boost mode. Both the JBLs have had their EQs completely off, and this is how I've tested them. Does it seem fair? Well, superficially it may not seem fair, but I'll tell you why exactly I've done this. The OPPO and the Realme straight out of the box have always sounded very boring. In fact, straight out of the box they seem like they have a serious amping issue. In fact, I think when I first reviewed them, I had to crank them all the way up to 70 and 80%, which made me think that there was something extremely wrong with them. I did consider, in fact, returning them on first impressions. But what I've found is that when the Realme is on the volume enhancer and in balance mode, it sounds the best when it's on those specific modes. And when the OPPO in particular is on the bass boost mode, it sounds the best and most natural sounding with that specific preset for the EQ. When it comes to the JBLs now, when you choose specific presets within the JBL app to lock them into certain EQ settings, or if you want to manually tweak things, it suddenly doesn't sound as good. In fact, JBL has done a terrific job with tuning these earphones straight out of the box. On the absolute neutral mode, with the EQs off, with the manual EQ off, and none of the presets on, I think the JBLs sound as natural as they can and their best. The minute the EQs are switched on, they tend to sound a little too tinny or a little too shouty, as if somebody is singing to you with their hands around their mouth, or it gets a bit too boomy and drowns out the detail, and the imaging just goes for a toss. So I think JBL has done a very good job with how they've tuned it out of the box, which is why I did keep both the JBLs with the EQ completely off. Now, I do think this is a fair representation of how to compare them when it comes to their sound, because I've gotten them all to sit as the best sounding they can be for this comparison. And I think it's a more even playing field rather than keeping all of them on absolute flat. So to sum up, what do I think about their build? Well, I think all of them are put together extremely well, but I do prefer the JBL's build because they've gone the matte route, and I have had the JBL 230NC for I think just over a year now, and considering it is a matte finish, it looks in terrific condition because it does have a few scuffs and scratches, but it doesn't look as aged as the Realme Buds Air 3 and the OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro. Now, another thing that's a dead giveaway about the Realme Buds Air 3 being older is that its ear tips have aged because they've yellowed. I've not really seen this with any other earphones that I've had, but the Realme in particular hasn't aged well. The scuffs and scratches on it. I did pick up the white thinking it wouldn't show as much. It doesn't show as much as a black one would, but the glossy finish is not the way to go. I like what JBL has done for sure. On a feature front, I think the OPPO and Realme just knocked the ball out of the park because they've got all the bells and whistles. They've got active noise cancelling. They've got simultaneous device pairing with the Realme. They've got dual device pairing with the OPPO, so you can swap between your laptop and your phone if you're having a work day and all. Whereas I think the JBL is focused more on being music oriented than using for work and whatever else. And another thing, in fact, I do like with the JBL, which I in fact used while I was taking the photo of the thumbnail for this specific video, was I was handling all of these earphones for the thumbnail, and the JBL wave buds fell from my chin height, which is quite a distance. I thought it would have broken, but both the earbuds popped out, and I was like, great, now I don't know where I'm going to find it because my studio is actually a mess behind the camera. Funnily enough, it wasn't anywhere inside. It had gotten lodged behind something, and it's only because of that Find My Buds feature that I was able to find those earphones. On a sound front, if you've seen the chapter about sound, I think it's fairly obvious which one has done very well. Now, I didn't think going into this that the Wave Beam would managed to get that working. Coming back to what I was saying. Yeah, so on a sound front, I wasn't expecting the Wave Beam to perform very well compared to these other earphones, because I think even in my in-depth review on it, it just didn't seem as hefty. It's not as enthusiastic, but all the other earphones have been very enthusiastic when it comes to the bass. So the Wave Beam, I'd say, is catered more towards somebody who just prefers more, should I say, rock music or acoustic music. Rock also, you can't even say you need a bit of a kick in rock. So it does have a market of people who don't like very heavy sounding music. So the others do very well. And of course the OPPO, I think, well, I've always really liked the natural sound that the OPPO has always carried itself with. In fact, OPPO does have a heritage of hi-fi audio, and they know what they've been doing. So I'm sure all of that technology has trickled down over the years, and it's finding its way into their audio products. The Realme Buds Air 3 can impress a new listener for sure, because it's got the sparkle, it's got the enthusiasm in the mids, it's got very shimmery highs. The bass is more than adequate. In fact, I think if you play around with the EQ settings, the bass boost plus, it does get a lot more body. It is a lot more fun to listen to. So it will keep a new listener very happy with the product for sure. But in time, you're going to just realize that it's a little too sharp, it's a little too brittle. The Realme Buds Air 3 have always caused ear fatigue. And speaking about fatigue, when it comes to the fit of each of these, the comfort, I found comfort to be a very important factor. In fact, I've had a few people even comment on some of my videos about how the OPPO, how the Realme feels a bit too large for the ears. In fact, I felt it in my left ear. Some people feel it in both ears. So my left ear, I think the concha over here is a bit smaller than the right. So the housing of these bodies is a bit too large. And I did originally think that the Wavebuds would be uncomfortable, but they are a bit odd because you have to sort of twist it in so it fits within the concha. So once it fits securely, the Wavebuds are very comfortable. I can sit for a long period of time and not feel any discomfort. So how much do these cost? Well, at the time of recording this video, they are going for an MRP. I'll tell you the MRP first and then what they're being sold for. The JBL Wavebuds MRP are 3,999, but they're being sold for 3,299. The JBL Wave Beam has an MRP of 4,999, but it's being sold for 3,989. The Realme Buds Air 3 has an MRP of 5,999, but it's being sold for 3,999. And of course, the OPPO Enco Air 2 Pro has an MRP of 4,999, but it's being sold for 3,499. So if you ask me which is the best value for money of all of these earphones, it has to be the OPPO, because at 3,500 rupees, it's just a little more than the Wave Buds, and in fact, is it less than the Wave Beam? Yes, it is in fact a bit less than the Wave Beam. So it's sitting in a very interesting price range. I don't think they've really fluctuated. In fact, when they even launched it, it was at 3,500 bucks, and it's super value for money because it's got all the bells and whistles. It's terrifically tuned, and I don't think you'll regret owning this because, like I mentioned, OPPO earphones are considered to be long-term earphones, at least in my opinion, because they've not given me any trouble. I've not had to go to a showroom to get things replaced, or I've not really had to reset the earphones. They've done what they had to do. I've bought them, I've used them, they've done what they had to do, and they've just worked perfectly fine. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative, and I hope I've also helped you make some sort of purchase decision. If you would like to support this channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.